In 2017, five ambitious travelers set out on a journey deep into the Cambodian jungle, chasing a dream that seemed larger than life. They weren't thrill seekers without purpose. Each of them carried a vision, a reason to explore, and a belief that discovery still existed in a world mapped by satellites and GPS. For days they pressed forward, surrounded by the endless green canopy, updating family and friends with short, cheerful messages. And then, without warning, everything went silent. No calls, no texts, not a trace. A search party was launched. Armies combed the jungle, but the group had simply vanished, as if the earth itself had swallowed them whole. 6 years later, the impossible happened. A single survivor stumbled back into civilization. His name was Ethan. He was gaunt, hollow-eyed, and carried the haunted look of a man who had stared too long into the darkness. He had no words, no memory, only scars carved deep into his body and a silence that chilled everyone who stood near him. What Ethan eventually revealed was not just the story of survival. It was a revelation so unsettling, so grotesque, that it shattered everything people thought they knew about what had happened in that jungle. They called themselves explorers, but in truth, they were more than that. Liam, Chloe, Ben, Maya, and Ethan were bound by a shared hunger for meaning. 5 individuals from different walks of life, all convinced that the world still had corners of mystery left untouched. Liam, the natural leader, was a strategist by profession, a man who thrived on turning chaos into order. Chloe, his partner, was the dreamer, an artist who believed beauty could be found in places most people feared to tread. Ben, the scientist of the group, had an obsession with ecosystems and the delicate balance of nature. Maya, bold and determined, carried the soul of a documentarian. Her camera was her weapon, and she wielded it to capture truth. And then there was Ethan, quiet but steady, the kind of man who carried strength without ever needing to prove it. Together, they were a team built not just for travel, but for discovery. Their preparation was meticulous. Maps were spread across kitchen tables, routes drawn and redrawn. They gathered survival gear with the precision of seasoned planners: water filters, satellite phones, solar chargers, medical kits, even a small supply of comfort food tucked away in vacuum-sealed bags. Each piece of equipment was chosen with care, not just to endure the jungle, but to thrive within it. They weren't reckless adventurers chasing adrenaline. They were deliberate, thoughtful, and calculated. They understood risk. More importantly, they respected it. The plan itself was ambitious but clear. A 60-kilometer trek through one of the most uncharted stretches of Cambodian wilderness. The route would take them across dense forest, narrow rivers, and valleys carved out by time itself. They estimated the journey would take just under 2 weeks. Communication protocols were in place, check-ins every 48 hours via satellite phone. If silence lasted longer than 72 hours, their families had been instructed to raise the alarm. It was a system designed to guard against the unknown, a safety net woven tightly enough to feel unbreakable. And in the beginning, it worked exactly as intended. The first 2 days passed with messages filled with optimism and laughter. Chloe wrote about the sheer size of the trees, describing them as cathedrals of green. Ben sent a note marveling at the untouched ecosystem, calling it a living laboratory, unspoiled and raw. Liam, practical as always, simply reported, "Progress steady, all good." Maya filmed short clips, her voice carrying the same excitement she always had when she was close to uncovering a story. And Ethan, though less expressive, signed his name to their updates, a silent reassurance to his family that he was safe. What no one could have imagined was how quickly a carefully planned journey could unravel. The deeper they went, the tighter the jungle seemed to close around them. The air grew heavier, the path less certain. But for now, in those early days, The team believed they were in control. The trek was challenging, but manageable. The silence of the jungle still felt like wonder, not warning. And the dream of discovery, was still alive, unbroken, and shining brightly ahead of them. The last message came on a Sunday evening. It was short, almost casual, just a note sent from Liam's satellite phone. Progress slower than expected, spirits high, jungle thicker than maps suggested. Will update soon. It was the kind of message that carried no sense of urgency, no warning of what was to come. For their families back home, it was a reassurance. They read it, smiled, and went to bed believing their loved ones were safe. But that was the last anyone ever heard from them. When the silence stretched past 72 hours, as planned, the alarm was raised. Calls went unanswered. The satellite phone rang into nothingness. Authorities in Cambodia were alerted, and within days a massive search operation was underway. Helicopters flew low over the endless canopy. Teams of soldiers and trackers pushed through the undergrowth, their machetes cutting paths into territory few had dared to cross. Families of the missing clung to hope, believing the five were simply delayed, maybe injured, but still alive. Then came the first sign: a campsite, deep in the jungle. It looked hurriedly abandoned, as if the group had left in the middle of the night. Backpacks lay open, some gear scattered across the ground. Maya's camera was there, but the memory cards were missing. A pot of rice sat half-cooked over cold ashes, untouched. Most disturbing of all, Ethan's jacket was found torn, lying beside the remnants of what looked like claw marks on a nearby tree. There was no blood, no bodies, just silence, and a feeling of something deeply wrong. From that point on, theories multiplied. Some believed the group had been attacked by wild animals. Tigers still roamed in small numbers through that part of Cambodia. Others whispered about bandits or illegal loggers who didn't want outsiders stumbling upon their operations. A few suggested they had simply gotten lost and succumbed to exhaustion, disease, or starvation. But those explanations never quite fit. These were seasoned, well-prepared travelers. They had gear, supplies, knowledge. To vanish without leaving a trace seemed impossible. Days turned into weeks. Every lead seemed to collapse into a dead end. Soldiers followed footprints that vanished at a riverbank. Helicopters spotted shapes that turned out to be fallen trees. Villagers in nearby settlements reported strange lights at night, but nothing came of it. Eventually, the search lost momentum. Resources dried up. The official explanation, cause undetermined, was nothing more than a placeholder for ignorance. For the families, the disappearance became a wound that refused to close. They replayed the last message over and over again, listening for clues in Liam's words. They imagined the campfire burning, the laughter that must have filled that last night before everything went wrong. They asked themselves the same haunting questions. What happened? Where did they go? And why? With all our technology, had they left behind only silence? The jungle had swallowed them whole. And for 6 long years, that was where the story ended. 5 names etched into the endless list of mysteries the world never solves. 6 years after the 5 travelers vanished, the story seemed destined to remain unsolved, a mystery frozen in time. Families had learned to live with unanswered questions, though the ache never truly faded. Then, one humid morning, a fisherman along the Mekong River saw something he would never forget. Stumbling barefoot along the banks was a gaunt figure, sunburned, scarred, and barely recognizable as human. It was Ethan. News of his reappearance spread like wildfire. At first, many doubted it was possible, yet medical records confirmed his identity. He had survived, though his body told the story of unimaginable hardship. His hair was long and matted, his skin toughened by years of exposure, and his eyes, haunted, yet unbroken, spoke of horrors no words could fully capture. In fragments, Ethan began to recount the nightmare. The group, he explained, had pushed deeper into the jungle when they realized their maps were misleading. Resources began to dwindle. They stumbled upon ruins and ancient stone site, half buried in vines where everything started to unravel. Strange noises at night, food supplies mysteriously missing, and then one by one, his companions vanished. Chloe disappeared first, without a sound. Ben soon after, his belongings left neatly arranged as if he had walked away willingly. Liam and Maya held on longer, but even they eventually succumbed to whatever force seemed to stalk them in the dark. Ethan never said exactly what happened in those final days. Some believed he withheld the truth out of trauma. Others suspected he feared no one would believe him. All he would admit was that he woke one morning to find himself alone at the abandoned campsite, and from that day forward, he survived on instinct, hunting small animals, drinking from streams, avoiding unseen eyes he swore were watching. When rescue teams retraced his steps, they found remains scattered near the ruins, fragments of bone, tattered clothing, and Maya's broken camera, its final images corrupted beyond recognition. No definitive answers emerged, only confirmation that the others were gone. Ethan's survival brought both relief and deeper torment. Relief, because the families finally had a witness. Torment, because his story left more shadows than light. The jungle had returned him, but it had swallowed the truth forever. When Ethan was finally admitted to a hospital in Phnom Penh, doctors and investigators crowded his room, trying to piece together the impossible. His body was the first clue. His skin bore deep scars across his arms and back, some resembling rope burns, others more jagged, as though from sharp branches or claws. His joints, when scanned, revealed signs of accelerated aging. Knees and shoulders carried the wear of someone who had walked barefoot and carried weight far beyond what the human body should endure. Then came the examination of his lifestyle markers. Ethan's teeth showed signs of a primitive diet: roots, raw fish, wild fruit, and game roasted over open fires. His fingernails were rough, broken, with no sign of the chemical traces modern life usually leaves behind. No caffeine, no preservatives, not even the faint residue of painkillers or antibiotics. It was as though he had lived outside civilization for years, untouched by anything modern. But perhaps the most unsettling discovery wasn't physical at all. It was mental. When specialists first spoke to him, he stared blankly, uncomprehending. He didn't recognize English, didn't respond to his own name, didn't even seem to understand who he was. His memories were fractured, fragmented, as though whole years had been erased. Occasionally, he muttered sounds no one could decipher, words that didn't match any known language. Psychologists concluded that Ethan was suffering from profound memory loss, possibly dissociation, a mind forced to adapt in order to survive, leaving his old self buried deep within. The medical team left with more questions than answers. Physically, Ethan's survival was extraordinary. Mentally, he was a ghost of the man who had entered the jungle. The mystery of what happened to him and to the others remained unsolved. In the weeks that followed Ethan's return, doctors and investigators noticed patterns in his behavior, strange habits that hinted at memories buried deeper than words. Even in the safety of a hospital room, he hoarded food under his bed, wrapping leftovers in napkins as though preparing for famine. Loud, sudden noises, a door slamming, a chair scraping made him flinch violently, his eyes darting to corners as if expecting something to strike from the shadows. These weren't just quirks. They were survival instincts, etched into his very being. Then came the drawings. Given a piece of charcoal and paper, Ethan would sketch obsessively, over and over, the same rough outline. A circle of jagged peaks, enclosing a narrow passage, a stream running through it, and a dark hollow at its center. At first, the images seemed meaningless scratches from a fractured mind. But when investigators compared them to old survey maps of the Cambodian highlands, the resemblance was undeniable. His drawings pointed toward a secluded valley, an area rarely visited, almost inaccessible without guides. Nature itself seemed to hold keys to Ethan's subconscious. When researchers played recordings of regional wildlife, he remained detached until the call of a rare hornbill echoed through the speakers. At once, his posture stiffened, his eyes widened. The same happened when he was shown branches of an unusual medicinal tree, native only to that remote valley. It was as though his body remembered what his mind refused to release. Piece by piece, these fragments suggested that Ethan's ordeal wasn't random wandering, but something tethered to that hidden valley. Whether it was sanctuary, trap, or something far more sinister, remained unanswered. Yet his instincts, his drawings, and his visceral reactions whispered of a truth still waiting in the jungle's heart. Driven by the fragments of Ethan's subconscious and the crude charcoal maps he left behind, a joint investigative team set out to retrace the steps of the missing group. Equipped with modern gear but burdened by uncertainty, they pushed into the same jungle that had swallowed 5 travelers years before. The deeper they went, the quieter the world became. Birds hushed, insects fell silent, and the air grew unnervingly still. Then, the signs began to appear. On tree trunks, investigators found strange carving symbols that looked hurried, almost desperate. Further in, they discovered crude shelters pieced together from bamboo and palm leaves, structures far too primitive for the group of educated explorers who had entered the jungle with tents and high-tech equipment. It was as though someone or something had forced them into a regression, stripping them of modern tools and leaving only survival instinct to guide their hands. The most chilling discoveries were personal. A rusted food container, a torn scrap of fabric, a metal spoon half buried in the soil objects that once belonged to the 5 travelers. These artifacts, ordinary in any other context, now served as haunting reminders that the group had been there, alive and struggling. Finally, at the edge of the secluded valley, the searchers stumbled upon shallow graves. 4 sets of skeletal remains lay there, alongside faded belongings that confirmed their identities. Watches, necklaces, even a wedding ring, small but undeniable proof. The remains told no clear story of how they had died, only that their final days were spent together in this hidden corner of the world. Ethan's survival was no longer a mystery of chance. It was a solitary miracle, surrounded by silence, graves, and questions that the jungle still refused to answer. The truth, when it finally surfaced, was darker than anything investigators had dared to imagine. In the heart of that isolated valley lived a man who had long abandoned civilization. No records could trace how he ended up there. Some said he had wandered in decades earlier. Others whispered he had chosen exile. What was certain, however, was that he had lost his grip on reality. This man had survived in complete solitude for years, his mind unraveling until he no longer resembled the society he had once belonged to. When the group of travelers stumbled into his hidden domain, he did not see them as fellow human beings. He saw them as possessions, like livestock. He forced them into submission, teaching them a bizarre system of communication made up of bird-like calls and clicking sounds. Food was given sparingly: uncooked roots, scraps of jungle meat, and whatever crude rations he allowed. Punishment was swift and brutal for those who resisted. It was a world stripped of dignity, of freedom, of humanity itself. For years, this nightmare became their reality. 4 of the 5 travelers perished under his twisted control. Only Ethan, through endurance and perhaps sheer chance, managed to break free and find his way back to civilization. The discovery of this wild man explained Ethan's scars, his malnourished body, his fragmented memory. He had not simply been lost in the jungle, he had been enslaved within it. And the chilling thought remained: had Ethan never escaped, the secret of that hidden valley and the broken mind who ruled it would have remained buried in silence forever. What investigators found was not just a survival story. It was a portrait of human descent, of what happens when isolation erodes the mind, and the line between man and monster disappears. The case came to a close in a way that felt both inevitable and unsatisfying. The man who had lived like a shadow in the wilderness, the one responsible for so much suffering, was declared unfit to stand trial. His mind was too fractured, too far gone. Instead of prison, he was committed to a psychiatric institution, where he would spend the remainder of his days more ghost than man. For the families of the victims, there was at least one form of closure. The remains of the 4 lost travelers were carefully returned home, laid to rest with the dignity they had been denied in life. Yet no verdict, no official statement, could ever erase the years of torment they endured, or the haunting image of Ethan, the lone survivor, forever marked by his time in the jungle. He walked out alive, but he carried within him the silence of the forest, the memory of captivity, and the weight of knowing that he had lived while the others had not. This story does not end with justice nor with triumph, but with a sobering reminder of how fragile the human spirit can become when cut off from the world. It is, at its heart, a tale of survival wrapped in tragedy, a man who returned to society but never fully escaped the jungle. If stories like this resonate with you, I invite you to stay with us. Subscribe to this channel for more untold mysteries, real accounts, and haunting journeys into the unknown.